Anyway, here we are on the Feast of Epiphany, the revealing of Christ. And I think it's a good place for us to be. And I think it's a good time for us to be looking at Fratelli Tutti and thinking about where we go from here and where we've been and who we are as followers of Christ and so on. So the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Gracious and loving God, as you have revealed yourself to us in Jesus Christ, as you have revealed yourself to us in the works of your hands in all of creation, as you reveal yourself to us in each other, may our eyes be open to see you, and our ears be open to hear you, and our hearts be open to love you, and our minds be open to understand you. May we be open to understanding that we are brothers and sisters in humanity, brothers and sisters as children of God, brothers and sisters in the Spirit, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
We were at paragraph 99, were we not?
I have 101. But
I do too.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, then I folded, yes, you're right. That's where I marked it. I folded down the wrong corner of the wrong page. Beyond a world of associates. Okay. Who feels called to do some reading?
I would, but I'm chewing.
Well, I can start until Phil finishes chewing.
Okay.
101. Let us now return to the parable of the Good Samaritan, for it still has much to say to us. An injured man lay on the roadside. The people walking by him did not heed their interior summons to act as neighbors. They were concerned with their duties, their social status, their professional position within society. They considered themselves important for the society of the time and were anxious to play their proper part. The man on the roadside, bruised and abandoned, was a distraction, an interruption from all that. In any event, he was hardly important. He was a nobody, undistinguished, irrelevant to their plans for the future. The Good Samaritan transcended these narrow classifications. He himself did not fit into any of those categories. He was simply a foreigner without a place in society. Free of every label and position, he was able to interrupt his journey, change his plans, and unexpectedly come to the aid of an injured person who needed his help.
Okay, let's stop there for a second. What does that have to say to you?
one of the things that says to me is that people had to have, it comes about their proper part, so that it's sort of like it wasn't my responsibility, it was somebody else's, because that's not what I do.
Right. We see ourselves in terms of our roles.
Mm-hmm.
And the Samaritan, he's a foreigner. He's traveling through an area where he knows he's a foreigner and no one expects anything of him. So what would that mean for us as we walk through life?
Doesn't it say Bible study? And right.
Who are you talking to, Bob?
Stephanie is having some difficulty getting on.
I'm sorry. Okay,
Well,
well,
I mean, everybody you meet is a foreigner. I mean, as you walk down Main Street in Seal Beach, you know, they're all foreigners. They're not part of my immediate family or immediate group of friends. So it's almost like they could all be foreigners.
All right. Well, how about how you see yourself? do you see yourself as fulfilling or living in a particular role?
I think that would have to be plural because we all have we have many roles.
Right? Well,
I refer back to your favorite verse in Micah, that we all have something to do. Walk humbly, obey God, and be kind to others.
And do justice,
yes.
Love mercy, or kindness. You know, that's a really central word, by the way, in that passage. The word in Hebrew is chesed, and it can be translated as mercy or kindness, both. And it's rooted in a love for the covenant law, for the Torah. It's a powerful word. Do justice, love chesed, which means not just justice and not just kindness. It means that, but it also carries with it this sense that you are bound to community, that you are bound to the rest of humanity, which is one reason I think that verse is so powerful to me. I mean, even if you just take it in its English translation, it's powerful.
Yes.
But when you understand that there's that deeper layer, that word chesed means that you are bound to community by covenant. It carries that responsibility with it. And walk humbly with your God. I think one of the things we've been missing in our contemporary Western version of Christianity is the deeper sense of responsibility that we're supposed to carry. I think we lose that a lot of times. So we end up with a kind of individualistic Christianity that focuses on my personal salvation and not on the salvation of the whole world, the restoration and redemption of the whole world, the healing of the whole world. And there again is that larger meaning of the word saved, that older meaning, to be healed, restored, made whole. So we start talking about being saved as if it means just having your own fat pulled out of the fire. I'm sorry, I'm starting to preach. All right, would you like to continue reading, Margie?
Well, one of the things that I would like to, something that I see in here is this idea of this anxiety, this anxious to play their proper part, as if somehow we already know what that part is. Like, did someone already give us this part and we somehow know it from birth, or somebody tells us what we're supposed to do? Like, how do we know what our proper part is? Do we ever know when we're doing our proper part?
Well, that's a good point.
I thought my proper part was being, the youngest of the group, but and thought at one point it was supposed to be done living in Long Beach, but here I am now living in Rome and doing it. So like, do we ever truly know what that is? Is that where the anxiety comes from? Is of never really truly knowing what that proper part is?
Well, that's an interesting point, Liz. And Amy Jill Levine, in her analysis of that parable, points out that one of the really shocking aspects of this parable for those hearing it from Jesus is that the priest and the Levite, when they see this man, actually have an obligation to stop and help him.
Yes, and they cross the road.
Right. And so Jesus's listeners are shocked by this because they are not doing their proper part. And that's why it's even more shocking when the Samaritan, who is this not just a foreigner, but a hated foreigner, of whom no one expects anything, is the guy who stops and helps. Yeah, for those listening to Jesus as he tells this story, this is a hugely shocking parable. But yeah, the priest
but
and the
as to knowing whether what your proper part is, I think it's pointed out that, I mean, the answer is not in this paragraph, but it's pointed out that they considered themselves important.
right.
And so it's self-importance that's at play here, not necessarily that there is really an assigned role.
Right. Although priest and Levite would have an obligation.
They do.
Yeah. Especially if they thought he was dead.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's one of the fascinating things. If they thought he was dead, they had an obligation to bury him.
Mhm.
True.
That would make him unclean, make them unclean too.
Right. It didn't matter though. They still had an obligation to do it. Her book, Short Stories by Jesus, does a great job of unpacking this and talking about how we've misunderstood it and misread it, and how a lot of commentators have gotten some things wrong about this. Anyway, yeah, thinking about ourselves in terms of, well, thinking about ourselves or
Very
making assumptions about ourselves and our roles. Let's press forward.
Could I just interject one thing that kind of occurs to me, because we're talking about roles, and it reminds me of a verse in one of, I think, the Gospels, that it talks about maybe Paul is saying it, that people have different gifts, and because you have a different gift, you have a different role. And that one of the things that you do in your faith is you try to identify the role that you have. Some people are gifted at doing a certain thing, and other people are not gifted at doing that, but they're gifted at doing something else. I probably takes this idea of role in this particular paragraph out of context, but it just occurs to me that we all have certain roles that we feel gifted in. And I think it also goes back to what Liz is saying about how do you know what your role is? You're looking at it in the abstract. You are a priest, or in the context of this parable, these men have certain roles and what's expected of them. But if you expand that and think about your role as what you are in a church congregation, and what niche you can fill because of the gifts that the Spirit has given you.
Right. And in terms of the building up of the church, that's really important.
Yeah.
In an emergency situation, sometimes you do what you can do, and you don't just because you're the one there to do it.
But these two guys had their role, and but they decided not to accept it at that moment in time.
Right.
One was the priest, so that was his role, was to whatever, I get Micah mixed up, but anyway, to do justice, show mercy, and walk kindly with your Lord. And the other guy, had his job to do too. And
Yeah,
their
just
role or their position.
right. Also, Jeffrey, one little note about the whole unclean thing. They were on their way down to Jericho, so they would have they were walking away from the temple, so their state of ritual cleanliness wouldn't have mattered.
Okay, a good point.
sorry, that was just suddenly something that clicked in my mind from what Amy Jo Levine had written too. But yeah, right, Margie.
And that second, the people walking by did not heed their interior summons.
Oh, good sentence.
Yeah, there's your role, Phil. They didn't do it. They had their gifts and they didn't use them.
Or they had a role, but they weren't really gifted for that role.
Or what about the basic word excuses? If it was us today in this situation, we tend to make excuses why we don't need to stop and help somebody. Did they make excuses back in that time? It's like, nah, you know, the word rationalize, they're rational lies. Why? What they're thinking.
Yeah, they did. He was unclean and he was a foreigner. That's their rationale.
Well, the text doesn't actually tell us. It just says they passed by.
Yeah, or they just feel they're too busy with their day to bother.
And while I understand we will be getting to 102 about nowadays, et cetera, what did they know? Did they personally feel qualified to help? I think nowadays people would say, well, I don't know that I'm qualified to help in that way. So.
Okay, this follows what Lyd just said. What would be the reaction to that same story nowadays in a world that constantly witnesses the emergence and growth of social groups clinging to an identity that separates them from others? How would it affect those who organize themselves in a way that prevents any foreign presence that might threaten their identity and their closed off and self-referential structures? There, even the possibility of acting as a neighbor is excluded. One is a neighbor only to those who serve their purpose. The word neighbor loses all meanings. There can only be associates, partners in the pursuit of particular interests.
Right.
That's pretty strong.
Yeah.
So we choose to be neighbors only with those who share our interests, share our opinions, share our preferences, and
or have the same goals as we have.
Right.
Or look like us or talk like us.
Right.
And that we're not afraid of.
Good point.
Yeah.
And that we're not afraid of that somebody's going to sue us.
Isn't that the truth?
You know?
Okay, Phil, your turn.
Okay. Liberty, equality, and fraternity. Fraternity is born not only of a climate of respect for individual liberties, or even of a certain administratively guaranteed equality. Fraternity necessarily calls for something greater, which in turn enhances freedom and equality. What happens when fraternity is not consciously cultivated? When there is a lack of political will to promote it through education in fraternity, through dialogue, and through the recognition of the values of reciprocity and mutual enrichment. Liberty becomes nothing more than a condition for living as we will, completely free to choose to whom or what we will belong, or simply to possess or exploit. This shallow understanding has little to do with the richness of a liberty directed above all to love.
Oh.
Wow.
By the way, do you all know where liberty, equality, and fraternity comes from?
That's France.
Right, the French Revolution.
Right.
You want me to go on? Paragraph 104. nor is equality achieved by an abstract proclamation that all men and women are equal. Instead, it is the result of the conscious and careful cultivation of fraternity. Those capable only of being associates create closed worlds. Within that framework, what place is there for those who are not a part of one's group of associates, yet long for a better life for themselves and their families?
Wow.
Yeah.
Individualism does not make us more free, more equal, nor more fraternal. The mere sum of individual interests is not capable of generating a better world for the whole human family, nor can it save us from the many ills that are now increasingly globalized. Radical individualism is a virus that is extremely difficult to eliminate, for it is clever. It makes us believe that everything consists in giving free rein to our own ambitions, as if pursuing ever greater ambitions and creating safety nets, we would somehow be serving the common good.
Mhm.
There's an interesting book that was reviewed in Wall Street Journal this morning, talking about how a meritocracy fails us, and this was one of the points that was being made in that book. That that if you emphasize advancement on merit, that becomes strictly a matter of individualism, and so the individual who advance feel entitled to their position. So
That's interesting. I'd like to see that. Which paper was that in?
it was in the Wall Street Journal this morning. I'll pass the article along.
Okay. It'll be behind a paywall though, won't it?
Probably. Well, not when I send it to you.
Oh, okay.
That's why I can send it, but you might have to pay for it.
Oh, okay.
Paywall, I haven't heard that expression.
I don't either.
Sometimes when I see that wall and I want to read something, I call it more like a wailing wall.
Yeah, it is frustrating, isn't it? I keep running up against that with the New Yorker. I subscribed to it for a while, and then I had to kind of cut back on the number of subscriptions I had. It's like, okay. Shall we keep going?
Yeah.
Somebody else like to read?
I'll read. Okay, universal love that promotes persons. Social friendship and universal fraternity necessarily call for an acknowledgement of the worth of every human person, always and everywhere. If each individual is of such great worth, it must be stated clearly and firmly that the mere fact that some people are born in places with fewer resources or less development does not justify the fact that they are living with less dignity. This is a basic principle of social life that tends to be ignored in a variety of ways by those who sense that it does not fit into their worldview or serve their purposes. I want to read one sentence again. If each individual is of great worth, it must be stated clearly and firmly that the mere fact that some people are born in places with fewer resources or less development does not justify the fact that they are living with less dignity.
Mm.
So is that the the traveler on the side of the road. I mean, he's expanded now from the Good Samaritan to look at people that the world in general tends to ignore.
I think so. Yeah, it's the people born in the slums of India. It's the peasants in Honduras and Guatemala who find themselves in the crosshairs of the drug wars and try to escape by traveling north.
Indians on our reservations that have no water.
Right. It's all of those people that we tend to, for some reason, blame them for problems they didn't create.
Yeah. And so we walk by them every day.
Right.
But
the caste mentality, right?
Right. But we walk by these people every day. Shall I go on? Or every human being has the right to live with dignity and to develop integrally. This fundamental right cannot be denied by any country. People have this right even if they are unproductive or were born with or undeveloped or developed limitations. This does not just detract from their great dignity as human persons, a dignity, a dignity based not on circumstances, but on the intrinsic worth of their being. Unless this basic principle is upheld, there will be no future either for the fraternity or for the survival of humanity. Wow.
That makes me think of the government's mixed attitude toward unemployed people, for example.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, we have this idea of associates, or we have transactional relationships with people that we feel comfortable associating with, that we can identify are within our group, so we associate with them, as opposed to looking at all people with dignity, which then removes that concept of eliminates the idea of having, how can I say it? Eliminates the idea of associate in our minds. Am I going down the right track on that? We've got associate on one side and a dignified person on the other. If you look at a person as being dignified, then they're no longer associates, but they're people you can relate to.
Yeah, basic humanity. It doesn't discriminate on the basis of social strata or, our own comfort, has really nothing to do with the individual's dignity.
Yeah. We tend to sort people into strata, don't we?
Yep.
Consciously.
Well, it's the way we're socialized.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay.
Some societies accept this principle in part. They agree that opportunities should be available to everyone, but then go on to say that everything depends on the individual. That sounds like a non sequitur. From this skewed perspective, it would be pointless to favor an investment in efforts to help the slow, the weak, or the less talented to find opportunities in life. This skewed. Investments in assistance to the vulnerable could prove unprofitable. They might make things less efficient. No, What we need, in fact, are states and civil institutions that are present and active, that look beyond the free and efficient working of certain economic, political, or ideological systems, and are primarily concerned with individuals and the common good.
Right. Let's unpack that, because there's
That's a lot.
yeah.
We have charities that look, but they're charities like, yeah, Salvation Army. There's Help the Child, something about the child. There's a bunch of stuff out there. I mean, I'm seeing them in my grocery stores. They're helping young people that have disabilities, and they're working in grocery stores, collecting carts and bagging groceries.
Right.
You know, Ralph's has made a huge effort in that arena.
We still see, though, a lot of language that says we should level the playing field and then leave it up to the individual person to see what they can do with it.
Mm.
But not everybody's in the same position to take good advantage of a level playing field, even because we all have a different kind of makeup. I mean, some of us have, we have different abilities, and some of us have different motivations. And I mean, people are just all over the lot. And, you know, people need different levels
All
of
parts of the
coaching and
body.
assistance.
Yeah. It's like, where is the level playing field? It's different for every individual.
Right. A quick practical question, Liz. Are you experiencing any delay, because Rome is some distance away? Oh, okay. You're muted, by the way. Okay.
This I know. I have it muted. I'm nodding because that's what I've been doing in class all day. Sorry.
Okay.
When you start speaking Italian back to us, we'll know you've crossed over.
Just out of curiosity, what time is it there?
It is in the it's about, we started at 7 o'clock, so what is it now?
Okay,
7:30.
That's fine. Thank you. That would, we started here at 10 o'clock. Oh, okay.
7 o'clock p.m.
In the morning or the night? Yeah.
7 o'clock p.m. Yes, we are 9 hours ahead.
So it's social hour for you.
Yeah.
Yes and no.
You're drinking wine, we're drinking mimosas.
Or iced tea.
You know, Pastor, another aspect of this, of number 108, I wonder if we're talking about the issue of the individual, benefiting the individual or sacrificing society. Because when we start talking about the efficiency of something, we start talking about, kind of purposely dumbing down or being less efficient in the interest of preserving individual dignity.
Yeah, where's the happy medium?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Indeed.
we don't want to go all the way to Ayn Rand, but
I am kind of reminded of the fact that I thought it, and maybe they don't even still do it, but I thought it was Switzerland where everybody had a job, and that, and your job might be just sweeping the street in front of your house. That was your job.
yeah,
Okay. Huh.
100% employment.
Yeah.
Wow. That's mind-boggling.
And students, if their job is to learn,
Doesn't that factor what Pastor said about motivation and the makeup of people kind of affect that as well?
Mhm.
I mean, some people may have the job of sweeping, but that may be that what they're satisfied with because they have other interests, as opposed to someone who feels constrained by that job and has other things that they want to do and are motivated to do something different.
Well, it's what they do best. I've always thought that would be ideal if people could actually do for their work what they're gifted in and what they're most, able to do. But it doesn't work that way generally in our society.
Hey, Bob, could you explain a little bit more about what you were talking about with 108? I don't think I quite followed where you were going with that.
Well, I'm struck in the last line that when it talks about that that states and civil institutions and are primarily concerned with individuals and the common good. And I'm thinking that, I guess I'm thinking a little bit like Ralph's, interestingly enough, is that there's a marked difference in going to the Ralph's up at the traffic circle or going to the Ralph's on PCH. And
Right.
and not the least of which is the quality of the checkout. And I mean, Ralph's on PCH, they really do hustle you through. On the traffic circle, it's painful. So yeah, painful for me anyway. And so you can obviously see where, at one hand, I much prefer going to the one, but by doing so, are we affecting the dignity of the people that are trying to work as checkout people?
That's interesting, Bob. I've noticed that too. There's a lot more energy on Pacific Coast Highway, but at the one at the circle, I have stood behind people that are disabled or in those scooters, and the checkers take a tremendous amount of care and time with them, asking them if they're okay, asking them lots of questions, making sure that they have everything they need as they leave, and actually calling one of the cart guys to come and help walk them out to their car or wherever they're going. So it does make it painful, but it's interesting to watch how much care they have for their older population that comes to that store.
It's an interesting observation.
It's very different.
That could be an effect of, PCH is in a more affluent neighborhood, whereas the one on the traffic circle is in a less affluent one.
Yeah.
Or
they pay a lot of attention to the individual. They're not just hustling the groceries through. They're paying attention to every individual that comes to that checks down. They pretty much ignore me, but they probably figure I'm pretty self-sufficient, other than I might forget something.
You're fine.
Yeah, they're able-bodied. Yeah. That's interesting that Ralph does that.
Isn't it also something in which how we relate to those individuals depending upon whatever store? It's that eye contact, it's that providing them with the respect of whatever they're doing. And so I know I personally have noticed if I am showing individuals respect and attention, courtesy, they react to me differently.
But I think it's also the population that's going there. I think the checkers are responding to the needs of the population. And at Ralph's on PCH, they just want to, it's all about fast, efficient. They're just in a hurry to get on to their next thing. And I think for some of the people that are going to Ralph's at the Circle, it's a big deal for them to go to the grocery store. It's a big part of their day. So that's what I've noticed.
And you see, this paragraph is talking about those kind of issues on a state basis.
Mhm.
All right.
So Stephanie, what you're observing is that somehow the checkers at the Ralphs on PCH have been instructed to treat their customers with the dignity that they deserve because they may be disabled or older and need help.
You know, I don't even know if they've been instructed. I don't know. I don't know if it's just
The
it's just
nature-
become
the
it's
nature of
just
the
become the
employee.
atmosphere
Yeah, that's a good point.
and the atmosphere. What do you want to call that? The work atmosphere, work environment that they're in. I think they've just developed it. I don't know. Could they have
So-
just
I always think something like that is, I could be totally wrong, but I think that some of that comes from the top down, that maybe managers have recognized the need
Manager.
and have demonstrated how they interact with people,
Mhm.
which then the folks that are working for them see how the managers are interacting and do so also. I would like to think that that's the case.
I think so.
Yeah, it's on my run home from a lot of it's on my circle of events. So I tend to go there more often than Bob does. So I've been watching it for a while.
And
Interesting.
you very well might be more sensitive to it too, Steph. I mean,
Maybe.
just because of who you are.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bob, you're not sensitive. No.
No,
I've never been accused of
No,
being
that's not what she meant.
He didn't mean that.
I would suggest,
maybe, who knows? But being, sensitive to that, and
Yeah.
typically women do more shopping. Men, they go in, they go out, they get it, they go out. They're, it's like, get me out of here. So it's a,
Yeah.
different reality oftentimes for men shopping.
I would suggest, Stephanie, that you write a letter to corporate Ralphs extolling the
Oh, it's a good
Yeah.
idea. Good
What?
idea.
Good idea.
employees do.
That would be really good.
That goes a long way for morale. And it's just, you noticed it, you've observed it. And I would write a letter to corporate Ralphs.
Yeah.
And
It
look-
feels more like a small town grocery store.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
And
When
I-
you go into a small town where they know everybody, it's just a different environment. But that's a good idea, Good idea, Margie.
I do know that the Ralphs at the traffic circle, I don't shop there. I shop the other one weekly. But I have heard that there have been problems at the other Ralphs at the traffic circle. One of the problems is the homeless will go in there. They'll go over near the, like the fresh salad area, soup and salad area. And they will, do horrible things. And people shy away. Some people just don't go to that Ralph's for many reasons. And that's one of them. People will go in there and then leave, obviously without paying if they're homeless. But a lot of people are uncomfortable going there.
Stephanie, on your next receipt on Ralph's, because I do this at pavilions, there's usually it's at the very bottom. It says something about go to www, and there's a survey.
Oh.
That will talk about your last experience at that market. And you can actually very quickly, add people's names. I do that with pavilions on a regular basis. And I've started doing that with COVID because those people, what would we do without them showing up? And their great attitudes and their kindness. And so at pavilions, when I go, I'll take the survey and then I add comments about the checker or the box boy or Jason the produce guy, or somebody that did something that made that shopping experience so good. You know, the kid that washed the cart, and I try to get their names. And what they do is they do employees of the month at each of those stores.
Oh,
And that way they get that recognition and they get little rewards. But it also is just a way for me to thank them for
good idea. Good idea.
And survey
Really
opportunity
good.
also comes on your phone a lot of times. The GPS that, you know, shows you where you've just been, and you can reply that way too.
Shall we move ahead?
Where are we?
109.
109.
109. Some people are born into economically stable families, receive a fine education, grow up well nourished, or naturally possess great talent. They will certainly not need a proactive state. They need only to claim their freedom. Yet the same rule clearly does not apply to a disabled person, to someone born in dire poverty, to those lacking a good education and with little access to adequate health care. If a society is governed primarily by the criteria of market freedom and efficiency, there is no place for such persons, and fraternity will remain just another vague ideal. Ooh.
That addresses what Bob was talking about, I think, right?
Yeah. Am I still going?
Yeah.
Okay, 110. Indeed, to claim economic freedom while real conditions bar many people from actual access to it, and while possibilities for employment continue to shrink, is to practice doublespeak. Words like freedom, democracy, or fraternity prove meaningless. For the fact is that only when our economic and social systems no longer produce even a single victim, a single person cast aside, will we be able to celebrate the feast of universal fraternity. Whoa. So those words, freedom, democracy, and fraternity, how we read those words and how disadvantaged or disabled people read those words are greatly different. I guess I should finish the part. Okay, Bob. Bob's cracking the whip back there. A truly human and fraternal society will be capable of ensuring in an efficient and stable way that each of its members is accompanied at every stage of life, not only by providing for their basic needs, but by enabling them to give the best of themselves, even though their performance may be less than optimum, their pace slow, or their efficiency limited.
Let's pause there. One of the things that brings to mind for me is the idea of guaranteed basic minimum income that some countries have been experimenting with, and it's been proposed here, and it's gotten a little bit of traction.
That'd be good.
Yeah, I find it a fascinating idea. Because it ensures that, it ensures that people have the freedom then to explore what it is they're good at.
Right.
And that nobody's going to live in complete poverty.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but depending upon where they live, I mean, you know, a basic income in some areas is a whole lot more meaningful than in other areas where, you know, life circumstance, you know, you can't get out of poverty environment.
Like the stimulus check.
Yeah.
You know,
But it does. Sometimes it makes me wonder. I'm a member of the Assistance League, and we provide backpacks and school supplies and all these things to these underprivileged children. And I always wondered, what if their parents were making a true living wage?
right.
Then we wouldn't be doing that, but that we would still be doing something because that's what we're dedicated to. But maybe the whole thing would rise up. I mean, we would be working more on making sure everybody gets dental care or something else. You know what I mean? It would change our focus, and we wouldn't be so focused on such basic stuff.
Yeah.
That maybe we'd be doing more mentoring, helping them in school. I don't know,
Yeah.
doing something, it would move our focus instead of just always being way at the bottom, always trying, just constantly working that bottom. Maybe if it just got raised up just a little bit. And I know the grandparents, a lot of times the grandparents would tell us they would refuse the backpack because the grandparents, that was something the grandparents in these families liked to do for their grandchildren, was buy their backpack. And they actually had to give out some of us a talk to say if they respect their dignity and allow them to do that. Sort of respect their dignity and allow them to take care of their basic needs, by giving them a reasonable salary. I don't know.
I picked up
living wage
on this one comment, and Pastor, I guess I'm going to ask you this question. Do you think that Pope Francis meant when he said feast of universal fraternity? Does that somehow equate to maybe heaven on earth?
No, I think that, in his opinion, that's something that should be a basic minimum. I think that should be where we all live. I think heaven on earth is broader than that.
I'm going to put you on mute. We have a trash truck.
I think that would be the starting point. Certainly, I mean, it's part of God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, but it's not the fullness of it.
So I guess I'm still going. So we're down to, I like the double speak business. That always reminds me of the two-faced politician.
Plural, politicians.
Yes.
Doublespeak is from 1984.
Yeah, I think it is. That book, George Orwell's 1984. 111. The human person with his or her inalienable rights is by nature open to relationship. Implanted deep within us is the call to transcend ourselves through an encounter with others. I'm going to read that again. The human person with his or her inalienable rights is by nature open to relationship. Implanted deep within us is the call to transcend ourselves through an encounter with others. For this reason, care must be taken not to fall into certain errors which can arise from a misunderstanding of the concept of human rights and from its misuse. Today, there is a tendency to claim ever broader individual, I am tempted to say individualistic, rights. Underlying this is a conception of the human person as detached from all social and anthropological contexts, as if the person were a monad, increasingly unconcerned with others. Unless the rights of each individual are harmoniously ordered to the greater good, those rights will end up being considered limitless. And consequently will become a source of conflicts and violence.
Oh, wow. Are we ever seeing that?
Yeah, that's right now.
Yeah.
That's what the anti-maskers are all about, I
Yep.
think.
Mhm.
It's like they think it's about their rights. They don't understand it's about their obligations to the
Yeah.
rest of
Yeah.
the community and their
Societal's
relationship.
greater.
Yeah. And they're detached from all social and anthropological contexts.
Right,
Yeah.
right. They've misunderstood freedom.
Mhm.
Well, any last comments? We will come in at 1:12 next week.
Okay.
Liz, so glad you could join us from Rome.
Yeah.
That's